Hello, John Dove here from Speed Mooting. Last month, we held the 2024 Plea in Mitigation competition. This was an online competition open to up to 180 competitors. It was a fun day and I thoroughly enjoyed hosting the competition. There were 3 rounds during the course of the day. 6 competitors made it through to the final, and in this video you will have the opportunity to watch the submissions put forward by all 6 of our finalists. For those that don't know, a plea in mitigation is an argument put forward by either a defence barrister or solicitor at a sentencing hearing, and the argument is presented on behalf of their client when they have either pleaded guilty or been found guilty of an offence. And the purpose of the plea in mitigation is to present an argument on behalf of their client such that their client receives the best outcome that they hope to achieve. So I hope you enjoy watching these submissions. For those that want to know, the competition was run by Rhys Duncan, who received an iPad and a trophy, and Oscar Gibbon was the runner-up, who received a £100 Amazon voucher and a trophy. Hey, hello and welcome to the final of the 2024 Plea in Mitigation competition hosted by Speed Mooting. My name is John Dove, the founder of Speed Mooting. Well, we've had a great day so far and we're up to the final. We have 6 competitors remaining who will be performing one by one their final plea in mitigation. And at the end of this, we'll have a winner and a runner-up. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first competitor in the final, William Denegri. William, are you with us?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I am.
All right, in your own time.
If it pleases the court, my name is William Denegri. I appear for the defence on behalf of Mr. Barry Anderson. May I check that Your Honour has had a chance to read the pre-sentence report?
Yes, thank you.
My core submission is that Mr. Anderson should not be imprisoned. I respectfully submit that any custodial sentence should be for less than 2 years. And crucially, I ask that Your Honour follow the pre-sentence report's recommendation to suspend this sentence. First, as to the sentencing guideline categories, I accept that harm is in category 1. However, respectfully, I differ from my learned friend for the prosecution's view on the culpability category. I would submit the culpability in both offences is not category A, but category B. My learned friend has argued that very recent possession of stolen goods puts the offence in category A. But in fact, Mr. Anderson was only arrested driving a stolen vehicle 2 days after the 5th of June burglary, and on the CCTV of the 6th of June burglary, he sat in the rear passenger seat. Your Honour may think that in the context of the case as a whole, this does not show very recent possession in category A. My learned friend also said that a high degree of planning of the burglary meant category A, but in fact, Mr. Anderson took part in just 3 of the 13 burglaries with no knowledge of the others. Indeed, the prosecution accept that he's not a major player in the gang. In contrast, Mr. Anderson's acquisition of the vehicles for resale and possession of a crowbar when arrested fit firmly in category B, which best reflects both the gravity and the context of the offence. Now, if Your Honour is not with me so far, I would submit that even points in category A would be balanced out by points in category C. In a case of mixed factors, category B is again appropriate. The category C points are that Mr. Anderson performed a limited function under direction with no planning, he acted on impulse, he committed limited intrusion into the homes, breaking locks and acting as a lookout, but never entering the properties. Overall, category B provides a starting point of a 3-year custodial sentence for burglary for stolen goods and a 2-year custodial sentence for burglary. There are 2 key points in mitigation that I respectfully should submit should reduce these sentences below the starting point. First, Mr. Anderson had a young, impressionable and impulsive mind. Having lost contact with his father at age 10 and left school age 14, he struggled to read or write or understand the consequences of his actions. He was just 18 years and 2 months old at the time of the offence. He has no previous convictions. Second, today, we see an altogether different picture of Mr. Anderson. From his deep remorse, he has built, in his own words, a turning point in his life. He has voluntarily developed new skills to address his offending, reconnected with his father, and has the prospect of a job at his father's firm. I submit that these points warrant a reduction to the bottom of the relevant guideline ranges. Mr. Anderson is also entitled to a 1/3 reduction for his early guilty plea. Together, these reductions would modify the sentence to 1 year in custody for the stolen goods and 8 months for burglary. The sentencing guidelines provide the sentences should be concurrent if offences are part of a series of the same or similar kind. These offences occurred within a tight time frame, under 72 hours apart, from the 4th to the 6th of June, and within a close locality, a few houses apart on any town road and nearby on any town street. Temporally and geographically, this is a similar series of offences and a concurrent sentence is proper. Your Honour, this is the most important part of my submission. Given that the defence proposes concurrent custodial sentences of under 2 years, I ask that Your Honour follow the pre-sentence report's recommendations and suspend the sentence. Mr. Anderson presents only a low to medium risk of reoffending. He has firmly grasped the chance to transform his life. He wants to be there for his partner and soon-to-be-born child, to build a legitimate career, and to engage with rehabilitation services. He fears that prison would once again expose him to the wrong crowd and decimate his efforts to turn his life around. Unless I can assist with anything further, that concludes my submissions.
Right, perfect. Oscar, are you back with us?
Yes, I am.
Brilliant. And are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, in your own time.
If it may please the court, I am Mr. Gibbon and I appear for Mr. Anderson in this case. I will firstly address the offences in turn and the relevant sentencing guidelines for them before moving on to personal mitigation on Mr. Anderson's behalf. Has Your Honour had a chance to read the pre-sentence report?
Yes, thank you.
I'm grateful. Mr. Anderson pled guilty to both offences. He is therefore entitled to a 33% reduction on any sentence that the court may otherwise pass. I submit that it is to Mr. Anderson's utmost credit that he is the only one of his co-defendants to do so, with them all having been convicted following trial. Considering the first offence of conspiracy to handle stolen goods, I agree with my learned friend that the harm caused was high. Mr. Anderson makes no attempt to downplay this and is aware of the value of property associated with the offence. Where I disagree with my learned friend is in the categorisation of Mr. Anderson's culpability. He did not have a leading role in the offending, indeed only being aware of 3 of the 13 offences committed by the group. I therefore respectfully submit that the correct categorisation of the offence is harm level 1 with category B culpability. If Your Honour accepts my categorisation of the first offence, then this results in a starting point of 18 months custody before credit and mitigation. Moving on to the offence of conspiracy to commit burglary, I disagree with both aspects of my learned friend's categorisation of the offence. In terms of harm, there was very minimal damage to property in the commission of the offence, and there was no violence used. My previous submissions as to Mr. Anderson's role in the group, and by extension his culpability, also bear weight in relation to this offence. I therefore urge Your Honour to consider the offence of conspiracy to commit burglary as falling into harm level 2, with Mr. Anderson's culpability falling into category B. This will lead to a starting point of 2 years imprisonment in respect of the burglary, before reductions for credit and mitigation. Your Honour will of course have regard for the totality principle. There is no reason why these sentences should not run concurrently. These offences occurred in quick succession, and I would invite Your Honour to view the indictment as a whole, one unfortunate spate of offending. Regarding sentencing, I submit that a sentence below 2 years custody, that is suspended is proportionate. It might be suitable to add a rehabilitation activity requirement as set out in the pre-sentence report. In terms of that pre-sentence report, the ultimate recommendation is a community order. However, Mr. Anderson and I are realistic about the seriousness of his offending. Should Your Honour accept in full my submissions in relation to the categorisation of both offences, the choice facing Your Honour is between an immediate custodial or a suspended custodial sentence. Mr. Anderson was formerly of good character, but was a man of limited opportunities. He did not have a job. He grew up without much money and fell out of education early. He has no formal qualifications to his name. He was enticed by money, with immature bravado doubtless playing its part. Yet, Mr. Anderson was ignorant to the scale of the group's offending. He did not boast on social media nor minimise his offending with not guilty pleas. He realised the error of his ways and admitted so in his first appearance at court. It therefore follows that Mr. Anderson's seemingly immature and brazen exterior, beneath that was and still is a man who knows right from wrong, for whom change is possible. I've taken instructions from Mr. Anderson about the opportunities in his life, and I would like to conclude with this. The 21-year-old man we see today and that 18-year-old that committed those offences on the 7th of June, almost 3 years ago, are two entirely different people. He has grown up fast. The young man before you is one for whom reform is more possible than for almost any other. Mr. Anderson will soon become a father and assume the responsibilities that come along with that. Mr. Anderson is due to enter employment with his father, who is himself a reformed offender, with whom he has recently reconnected. Mr. Anderson, frankly, needs to spend less time with criminals, not more. Mr. Anderson is a man with plenty to lose should he not stay on the straight and narrow. Your Honour, unless I can assist the court any further, that concludes my submissions.
Right, Liberty, are you ready?
Yes.
Perfect. In your own time.
I, Liberty Moore, act on behalf of the defendant, Mr. Barry Anderson. Has Your Honour had sight of the pre-sentence report? I concede at the outset that the court is likely to find that the custody threshold is passed. However, in my submission, the court could find the inevitable custodial sentence could be suspended with the requirements as outlined in the pre-sentence report. This would be a constructive alternative to an immediate custodial sentence that would both punish the defendant and allow him to be rehabilitated in the community, ultimately reducing his risk of reoffending in the future. Firstly, to take a look at the offence as a whole. The Crown suggests that the burglaries are a Category A high culpability, and I would respectfully submit that the offences are better categorised as a Category B medium culpability. Mr. Anderson has not participated in the planning and organisation of the offence, and the prosecution have accepted this by its basis of plea that he's acting on the instructions of other defendants. It's not disputed that the burglary is a Category 1 due to the value of the vehicles appropriated. However, it is submitted that in each of the burglaries that Mr. Anderson was involved in, the vehicles were all recovered and therefore the economic loss was fortunately minimised. In view of this, I would submit the appropriate starting point is 2 years custody with a range from 1 to 4 years. In relation to the offence of handling stolen goods, it is again conceded that the offence is a Category 1 due to the value of the goods. However, I would again submit that the offence is better categorised as a medium culpability. Whilst the goods are from a recent dwelling burglary, the defendant has performed a limited function under the direction and he was not a leading role. The sentencing guidelines put this categorisation as a starting point of 3 years custody with a range of 1 year, 6 months to 4 years custody. It is submitted that whilst the custody threshold is passed in this case, any sentence imposed with the appropriate third credit imposed for the early guilty plea could be suspended. Moving on to the personal circumstances. Mr. Anderson was a small part of a larger operation who, perhaps naively, believed he was assisting in a few burglaries for a quick remuneration, and he did not know the scale of the operation. This naivety likely stems from the fact Mr. Anderson was 18 at the time of the offence and only just an adult. After 3 years of reflection since the offences were committed, Mr. Anderson now understands the seriousness of the offences, and he recognises the anxiety, the stress, and the fear that would have been caused to the homeowners. Mr. Anderson pleaded guilty, and it is submitted that the early guilty plea reflects his remorse because he did not want to put these homeowners through the criminal justice system and have to give evidence and sit through a trial. Mr. Anderson concedes that he fell in with the wrong crowd. He struggled at school, he stopped attending in year 10, and he left school with no qualifications. He has never actively sought a job, and the commission of the offences was a short-term option for financial gain. He now sees the errors in his ways and would not engage in criminal activity again for money. For the last 3 months, Mr. Anderson has been voluntarily attending his father's office several days a week to receive training with the intention to receive a full-time job later this year. This actively shows Mr. Anderson's change in attitude and desire to earn money legitimately and build a career away from crime. Mr. Anderson is keen to avoid an immediate custodial sentence, especially as he's due to become a father in September 2024. Mr. Anderson's father was absent from the age of 10, and he's only just re-established contact in December 23 to support Mr. Anderson through these court proceedings. Mr. Anderson does not want to miss the early stages of his child's life and wishes to provide a better role model for his child than he had. Your Honour will be aware of the Court of Appeal case Crown and Abdilia, where the delay from the offence to the charge and sentence, if by no fault of the defendant, can be taken into account in mitigating the sentence ultimately imposed. Here, there has been a delay of 3 years where proceedings have been pending through no fault of the defendant, and he has begun a new life free from offending. In conclusion, Mr. Anderson is a man of good character who entered his early guilty plea at the first available opportunity. The defence submit that the custodial threshold is passed, but he is suitable for unpaid work and a curfew to reflect the seriousness of the offending. Mr. Anderson is keen to work with the probation service, and he believes they will have a positive impact on his life. As per the Sentencing Council guidelines, this defendant has strong mitigation and a realistic prospect of rehabilitation to justify the imprisonment term being suspended. Unless I can assist the court any further, those are my submissions.
Okay, Jennifer, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
In your own time.
May it please the court. I am Miss Jo, and I appear on behalf of my client, Mr. Anderson. Before I proceed, may I check that Your Honour has a copy of the pre-sentence report?
Yes, thank you.
I'm grateful. I'll be asking the court to follow this report, imposing a suspended sentence at the bottom of the respective categories for both of the offences. I also urge the court to consider concurrent sentences just and proportionate. Beginning with categorization. The conspiracy to burgle is indeed a 1A offence, whose starting point is 3 years custodial sentence, and whose range is 2 to 6 years. However, I submit that Mr. Anderson should be sentenced at the bottom of this spectrum, 2 years, for factors that I'll turn to in just a moment. Regarding the conspiracy to handle, I challenge the prosecution's 1A categorization, submitting that the offence has only reached Band B culpability. As the prosecution accepts, Mr. Anderson was acting under the instruction of others, not plotting himself. It's right, I submit, therefore, to say that he only had some degree of planning. Furthermore, though he was found with a crowbar, as the prosecution have submitted no evidence that this was a knife or a weapon, Mr. Anderson can at most, I submit, be seen as being equipped for burglary. The sentence, therefore, starts at 2 years custody and ranges from 1 to 4 years. Again, I ask the court to sentence in the lower range, and in any event, no more than 2 years, because of the factors that I now turn to. Your Honour, it's my submission that there are no aggravating factors for the handling offence, and only 2 for the conspiracy to burgle. It's true that the first burglary was committed at night, but it's worth noting that only this burglary was said to be committed overnight. It's also true that the offence was committed as part of a group, but within this group, Mr. Anderson had a very minor role indeed to play, as I will elaborate on. In contrast, there are a bevy of mitigating factors. Chief amongst these is my client's remorse. Your Honour, Mr. Anderson pled guilty at the very first opportunity, the only member of a 6-man gang to do so. I urge the court to give him full credit for this in the form of a 1/3 reduction. Secondly, he had a subordinate, limited role in the gang, as a lockbreaker and as a lookout. His involvement was only over 3 nights. He was entirely ignorant of the other burglaries committed by other members over the course of 3 months. All of this demonstrates that he was but a very minor part of the conspiracy. Additionally, my client was just 18 years old at the time of offending. At this point, I'd like to point your honor towards paragraph 6 to 8 of the report, which characterizes him as immature, as vulnerable to influence, and as prone to bravado. Your honor, my client was neither a ringleader nor a mastermind. He was a susceptible young man, brought into the gang by someone he considered his friend. It's right, I submit, to reflect this in a lighter sentence. Furthermore, Mr. Anderson comes from difficult personal circumstances, not attending school regularly for much of his life, and growing up largely supported by just one parent. Additionally, he is now on the cusp of receiving full-time work in his father's marketing agency, a job which will allow him a legitimate source of income and a way to turn away from crime. Finally, it's worth noting that he is a man of no previous convictions and total good character in the eyes of the law. On these factors, it's my submission that Mr. Anderson should rightly be given a suspended sentence. Should he receive an immediate custodial sentence, his career, his ability to be with his family, and the window into a better life that these things offer him would be taken away. In terms of totality, it's just and proportionate, I submit, to impose these sentences concurrently, not just because they arise from a series of offences of the same kind, but because Mr. Anderson has behaved well on bail, and the court should have, I submit, the strongest faith in his ability to continue doing so, without the need for a longer consecutive sentence as a deterrent. On the basis of these submissions, I urge the court to follow the guidance of the report, imposing a suspended concurrent sentence of no more than 2 years. Your Honor, it's no exaggeration to call this a turning point in Mr. Anderson's life. It's my submission that he should be allowed at this moment to leave the incident behind with as short of a sentence as possible. Unless I can assist the court any further, that concludes my submissions.
Okay, Daniel, are you with us?
Yep, I'm with you.
Perfect. All right. Are you ready?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, in your own time.
May it please the court, my name is Mr. Nibbs and I appear on behalf of the defendant, Mr. Anderson. Before I begin my submissions, may I ask whether Your Honour has received and read the pre-sentence report?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I will make 3 substantive submissions. The first will relate to the sentencing guidelines. The second will relate to personal factors in relation to the offending behaviour. And the final submission will relate to the opportunity that we now have to enforce effective rehabilitation. Turning to my first submission, this defendant was involved in offences relating to the commission of a string of 13 burglaries. Whilst it is conceded that those 13 burglaries required a high degree of planning and resulted in a high degree of suffering, I would like to remind Your Honour that this defendant was only involved in 3 out of those 13. He was not the main player in those burglaries, and his role in those burglaries was minimal. He had no idea of the scale of the burglaries, or the planning involved, or the harm that was suffered. He pleaded guilty to 2 offences. In respect of count 1, conspiracy to handle stolen goods, it is my respectful submission that this defendant's actions fall into category C on the issue of culpability and category 2 on the issue of harm. Therefore, the starting point for this offence, as per the sentencing guidelines, is a high-level community order. In respect of count 2, conspiracy to commit burglary, it's my respectful submission that this defendant's actions fall into category B on the issue of culpability and category 2 on the issue of harm. The starting point for this offence is 1 year and 6 months in custody. Since this defendant pleaded guilty at the earliest instance, I trust that Your Honour will impose the 1/3 reduction in any event. Turning now to my second submission, which relates to Mr. Anderson's personal attributes which directly relate to the circumstances in which these offences were committed. Those personal factors are contained between paragraphs 2 and 6 of the pre-sentence report. Growing up in a single-parent household from the age of 10, Mr. Anderson did not have much in respect of moral guidance. He left school at 14 with no qualifications, with little in terms of reading and writing skills, and was quick to fall in with the wrong crowds. For these reasons, as it was concluded at paragraph 7 of the PSR, Mr. Anderson displays a lack of consequential thought and often engages in risk-taking behaviour. This, paired with his age and low level of maturity, undoubtedly contributed to his conduct in June 2021. Further, as a result of his lack of qualifications, Mr. Anderson was unable to find work. Although he volunteers for work, he is currently unemployed and is in receipt of universal credit. He saw those burglaries as a quick fix for cash, which would set him up in the short to medium term. However, things are looking up for Mr. Anderson, and as such, it has never been more important that he fully rehabilitates in order to break any temptation of falling into any offending behaviour in the future. With this in mind, I turn to my final submission. Mr. Anderson is fully remorseful. He currently views his offending behaviour as an 18-year-old as immature and uncalculated. He has a baby on the way with his girlfriend, who is 21 years old. He has recently regained contact with his father, with whom he had no contact since he left that family home in 2010. Mr. Anderson's father, who himself has been rehabilitated, has set up a social media marketing firm. Mr. Anderson has the opportunity to work at that firm in the near future, giving him an opportunity not only to secure work, but to secure his future. Thus, in consideration of sentencing, it is my respectful submission that a custodial sentence would do greater harm to this defendant, who has taken steps to change and who at this very moment has a significant key to change the course of his future prospects. It's with that I urge Your Honour to impose 20 rehabilitation days along with unpaid work as a punitive measure. Indeed, this was the recommendation made at paragraph 9 of the pre-sentence report. In the event that Your Honour is minded to pass a custodial sentence, it is my respectful request that it be suspended. This will allow Mr. Anderson to build a stable career, maintain his loving relationship, and be a good father to his unborn son. Unless I can assist any further, those are my submissions.
Okay, Reese, are you with us?
Yes, I am, yes.
Perfect. Are you ready?
Yes. Yeah.
Brilliant. In your own time.
Thank you. May it please the court. This afternoon, I'll be inviting Your Honour to follow the pre-sentence report recommendations that any custodial sentence be suspended to allow Mr. Anderson to continue the upwards trajectory that his life is now taking. In doing so, I'll look at both offences in turn. Dealing first with the handling of stolen goods. It is accepted that the harm in this case is of Category 1. However, dispute is taken with the prosecution's analysis of culpability as falling within Category A. Whilst there are some Category A features, there are a number of key elements missing. It is accepted by the prosecution that Mr. Anderson does not take a leading role in the offences. It is accepted his role is relatively minor by comparison to other parties. He does not involve others himself. He does not abuse his position in relation to any of the victims. Rather, his role is of a limited function, under direction from others, coerced by former associates who don't inform him of the scale of crimes that are being committed. These are all Category C criteria and show a lesser culpability. To strike a fair balance, therefore, we should look between Category A and Category C, factoring in those circumstances, and it is submitted that Category B is the most appropriate on these facts. The guidance states that this gives a starting point of a 3-year custodial sentence, with a range from 1 year and 6 months up to 4 years. On the facts, however, there are no aggravating factors, but instead a wide range of mitigating circumstances. Mr. Anderson has no previous convictions. He's accepted he had a lack of maturity at the time of the offences, being at a young age, and has since taken steps to turn his life around, volunteering, seeking meaningful employment, and building a life with his partner with a child on the way. For the first time in the best part of a decade, he now has a real prospect of training and work ahead of him. We must also not forget his difficult upbringing, him leaving school at an early age, falling in with a bad crowd, and having no paternal figure. We must also factor in the guilty plea, entered at the earliest possible occasion, showing genuine remorse for his actions and their impact on others. If the court is to impose a custodial sentence, 1 year and 6 months appears the most reasonable on the facts. Moving then to the domestic burglary. Again, it is accepted the harm falls within category 1, however, at the tail end of this category. Whilst there are persons on the premises at the time of 2 of the cases, and the value of the cars overall is high, there is no violence, there is no personal injuries, no extensive damage to the property, no public disorder. And this is relevant when considering this appropriate sentence. And whilst the prosecution say the culpability for this offence should be within category A, this again is disputed. There were no weapons present at any of the burglaries, and although there was clearly some degree of planning, to term this as significant or sophisticated seems excessive. We must bear in mind that one of the cars stolen was later abandoned within a matter of hours, leaving a pair of DNA-riddled gloves inside, whilst another was still being driven several days later with a crowbar in the back. These, it is submitted, are not the hallmarks of a particularly sophisticated crime with a significant level of planning involved, and therefore the most appropriate category is category B. This carries a starting point of a 2-year custodial sentence with a range from 1 to 4 years. And whilst there is some aggravation that the offence took place at night and were part of a group, there are far more significant mitigating factors. Again, Mr. Anderson had a subordinate lesser role. He had no previous convictions. He has shown significant remorse and taken steps to improve his life and support his partner and soon their child. He's overcome maturity issues, a difficult background, and again, has entered a guilty plea at the earliest possible opportunity, demonstrating his remorse. Bearing all this in mind, the most appropriate sentence would be for a year, or certainly no more than 1 year and 6 months. As to whether these should be consecutive or concurrent, it is submitted that concurrent is the most reasonable on the facts. The 2 offences are intrinsically linked. The handling of stolen goods cannot occur on the facts without the burglary, and the burglary necessarily brings the handling of stolen goods. In any event, however, the sentence should be no more than 3 years, even if consecutive. Otherwise, this would be highly disproportionate and unreasonable. Considering then the early guilty plea, a reduction of 1/3 takes us to at least 2 years or below, where a suspension may be permitted. And it is submitted, in line with the pre-sentence report, that a suspended sentence is the most reasonable in the circumstances, both to support the future of the defendant, his partner, and their child. Unless I can be of further assistance, that concludes my submissions. Thank you.